thick leather here. The less adhesive the better, just in case of discoloration. Now I'll bind it round, taking care not to shift. Not all spines need to be bound, but if they tend to stick up, then it's a good idea. It's just possible that if the edges of the old spine are sticking up, the movement, the binding around of the tape will cause the spine to be pushed over. If I take the tape off within 10 minutes, there's a good chance that if the spine has been dislodged, I can move it back again, in which case I would use the whole palm of my hand to shift it over, not the fingertips, because there's a great danger that a piece will be pulled off. But if you use the whole palm of the hand to slide it, there's less danger of damage. Fortunately, nothing has shifted. The texture of the tape has come out just here and there, so I'll rough that out. Now, in about 2 hours' time, when this is thoroughly dry, I would normally give this quite a brisk rubbing with a greased folder, so that although this is well stuck on now, it doesn't fill an integral part of the book. I can feel edges, but if I give it a brisk rubbing down the joints and over the bands, it will fill much nicer and smoother.
When you say a greased folder, greased with from the
Over
hair?
over the hair, yes.
Lines that I've drawn on the calf. And also do something with the actual structure of the book. So I've made some false bands which are peeping through the spine, and just been quite geometric really in my approach. My things tend not to be very painterly. They're much more to do with line and quality of surface. And you know, I've tried in my own small way, and I realised just how difficult it is to get it looking really good. So, I mean, I agree with her. There are other ways of decorating books. I don't think there's a God-given rule that a book has to have gold on it. And sometimes I feel some books have too much gold on them. These sort of snaky quality clasps which hold the book together. And she's just sandwiched it between two pieces of perspex. And then she has her own handmade paper, end papers with little filaments of some sort of fibre in, and she has made a flexible spine, and it all reflects the sort of speech bubble quality of what's going on inside.
You have another one
press called The Art of Binding Books, which, well, you can see how tiny it is. And what I have done with this one, this is something that I just did for myself because I thought it was such a delightful little book. Made so that the spine leather is actually attached onto the end papers, and you make the boards completely separately, and then they get a simple design, which is his stylisation of a triumphal arch with a blind-tooled landscape line, and this represents a small person approaching the arch. And it's his own method of binding. I don't know how he would describe it really himself, but the actual book is bound onto a piece of linen which is the same dimensions as the book and is then sandwiched into the outer cover and the doublure. Sits in so, titling both there and then mistress is repeated.
That's
there.
very nicely done.
Very
isn't it?
simple, and it just kind of, in fact, you've got with vellum and goatskin, and then alum tawed goatskin, which I've also then repeated my idea from the other one. Oh, it took perhaps an hour to sand. That was all really. It's so fine and so flexible. It was wide green leather onlays, which is a book by Richard Mabey called In a Green Shade, Essays on Landscape. And so green has obviously been her theme that she's taken with this. And she has also coloured all the edges. And this again is traditional full leather binding. I think this was also part of her graduation project. But this is a new binding to me. I've not seen this before.
Obviously, we can't see the bottom of the tank. How shallow or how deep is it?
The tank size, about the colours are suspended on rows of nails on these frames. I bring this coarse comb down. It's quite deep in the size. Get a lot of movement on the colour to prepare us for the pattern that's going to be laid on it. Next come the fine needle combs, which have to be very carefully drawn across the tank, trying to keep the depth the same right across the trough.
The needles are in the solution all the time?
Yes, they just touch the surface, hopefully at the same depth all the way across. If the depth was to vary, or were to vary, it would pull the pattern badly across one way or the other. If they came out, it would spoil the pattern. This is the final comb, which we gently move from side to side. It's actually two combs in one, and gives us the peacock effect. Next, I have to transfer the pattern to a piece of paper.
The paper's been prepared with alum, has it not?
Yes, the paper was pre-treated this morning by sponging it over with an alum solution. You have to be careful as you're laying the paper not to get any air bubbles between the paper and the size, which would leave gaps in the pattern. We just wash off the excess seaweed size. Hang the sheet to dry, which has been made.
Marcus, how long have cockerel papers been made?
As far as I can tell it, it's something like 70 years. Sandy Cockerell worked in his father's bindery. Some of them were based on more traditional designs.
And did Sandy do any of the marbling at all himself?
Neither myself or my partner, who worked for him for 20 years, has ever seen him do any marbling. William Chapman did all the marbling. Sandy Cockerell himself was a binder, and it's pretty much what he did.
How many papers can you produce, or how many sheets can you produce in the course of the working day?
We can produce, when we're just marbling and not doing other things connected with the business, about 50 or 60 sheets in a day, sometimes, if things are going well, with one pattern. But quite often, we're doing more than one pattern in a day, and it can sometimes take half a day just to set one pattern up.
Is that because of the difficulties of getting the colour mixes right in the troughs, or what? What kind of papers do you marble on?
It's a cartridge paper. It's a machine-made cartridge paper, but we have to have it specially made to reach most archive standards. It's neutral pH with added cotton, lignin-free.
Just a couple of patterns this afternoon, but you've got many more.
And then I can take the backboard away. Same again with the front board. Break through. It's quite weak in this area. And again, just with the knife, just go through the little threads that are holding it in place. Okay, so that's the spine. It's still got its old stiffener on the back, but I'll leave that there until I'm ready to actually put the old spine back onto the new one. It helps to support it. I'll put that to one side. And now I can lift the cloth off the board. To do this, I use a lifting knife, which is it's just an ordinary table knife, but it's very flexible and nice and thin, and it's quite sharp on this edge. I've sharpened it up quite sharply there, and I can get just underneath the cloth and gently prise it up. It's no good using a sharp knife like this with a point, because you'll just come straight up through the cloth and damage it. You want something with a nice broad, wide blade. So you just gently find a little area where we can start to work in. There we go. Just gently rocking the blade. And I want to go in about as far as this gold line here. That'll give me a nice area to key onto with a piece of new material. It's actually easier if you have a pressing board, so you lift up the board slightly. So I'll just get one. Now, if I put that on the edge of a pressing board, you see, I can get a little bit more leverage up and down. Set this all the way along. And then on the inside, I'm just going to go underneath the turning here. And I'm actually cutting on the inside edge of the board there, there on the inside edge, and the cloth lifts off the board edge here with the outside piece. I'll just do the turning at the other end. Okay, and then I can just, using the mull, can see the mull underneath here, underneath the end paper. I'm using that as a support to lift the original end paper. So again with the knife, just working my way slowly down. And don't lift any further than the mull because you'll damage the original paper. And there we are, I've got a nice flat there to work into with some new linings and end paper extension when I come to do it. And just do the other board. The other board is plain, so it hasn't got a gold line unlike this one to work to. So I use a slightly different technique where there isn't embossing or a line to work to hide the actual lifting. So what I do here is just lift slightly on the edge. Just run the blade down. And then turn over and lift the turn in. Again, cutting on the inside edge to the depth of the mull. So we've actually got the edges coming up and this little bit of material here. And then what I can do is use a roller, just a wooden roller like this, and I can just attach that little bit that I've lifted to the roller, and then rotate the roller slightly just to roll the cloth off the board. Okay, and that rolls up, and I've not creased it at all here. It's just rolled away from the board, and it gives me a nice area to work inside. I'll just roll it a little bit more. So if you've got a board without any embossing, which you can lift into, a line to lift into, plain board like that, it's always best to use a roller. I'll just lift the inside edge on this one completely. This little piece here was the turning down the spine. I don't really need that, so I'm going to cut that off. And sometimes these little pieces are ideal for doing corner repairs. If you need to repair a corner, you've got that little bit, which is exactly the same type of cloth, same colour and everything, just to repair the corner. And on this particular book we've got two bottom corners here which are slightly worn. Okay, after lifting the cloth on the sides, I need to pare into the actual surface of the board here what I call a slot to take the rebacking material which I'm going to use. And this really wants to be, on this particular board, wants to be probably about 15 millimetres in. I mean, it's not critical, between 12 and 20, depending on the size of the book really. So I'll just set in the dividers to approximately 12-15 millimeters. I'm just going to make a mark in the board, and then using a rule and a bone folder, which is quite sharp, I'm going to bone a line into the surface of the board. This is parallel with the edge. See that? There we are. Just running all the way down there. I'll just do the other board as well. Same distance. If you've got a board like this with a gold line, you could use one of these gold lines here, but that particular one is a little bit too close to the edge for my liking, and this one is a little too far in. So I'm going to use the same measurement and go in about 15 millimeters again. And just make a mark. Bone in the line. I'm now going to use my paring knife and pare in here. So I'll be using my knife and paring in, running down here and lifting part of the board. So I use quite a lot of pressure with this. It's quite hard. This is straw board. Once I've got a cut in there, use the knife. This way round. You see just a lip. You can see there. A lip in the board. But it's very hard. I mean, straw board is quite a soft board compared with the fibre board that sometimes they used on earlier books. So you need to have a very sharp knife, but it soon loses its edge. I think it's a little bit harder here where it's had the impression from the gold blocking, which has compressed the board even more, so that's why it's a little bit harder, but there we are. You can see I've got a slot there into which the new covering material will go eventually. I'll just do the other one. Okay, now I've done both boards, so we can return our attention to the actual board book block itself. This has had a nice little soak with the paste on it, so I'm just about to remove the surplus paste. And I use the back edge of my lifting knife for this. This is quite blunt, so I can gently scrape away at the glue. And the old mull that's still there. There it is, there's the mull. And everything just nicely comes away. There's one thing you have to be careful of with some books. They did use this technique of sewing through the mull, and if you're not aware of that, you could be pulling away at the mull and all of a sudden the book falls apart because you're actually pulling the sewing threads out as well. So take care. I just need a bit of scrap paper to wipe that onto. Sometimes you don't get it all off in one go, so you might have to put another layer of paste on to get it as clean as you really want it to be, which I think I'd like to on this actually. Because there's still quite a lot of animal glue still there, so I think I'll put a little bit more on. But interestingly enough, I don't know whether you can see that this book has actually been sewn on one cord and 2 tapes, which is quite unusual. You don't often get a mixture of that, but that just shows that it was actually hand sewn, not machine sewn. But 1 cord and 2 tapes. I think sewers actually used to make up their own ways of sewing, and whichever way suited them, I suppose. So I'll put another coat of paste on there, I think. I've just finished cleaning off the second coat of paste, so the spine is relatively clean now, so I can proceed. What I like to do is just to sharpen up the shoulders on the book. I do this by putting a couple of bits of scrap board against the shoulder, which is the same height, and then just with a bone folder just working down the edge just to sharpen this up. And then repeat the process on the other side. And you can see there's the shoulders reasonably sharp. If it had lost its shoulders completely, I would have put it in a lay press and got them back with a hammer, but on this particular book it wasn't necessary. So our next job now is to apply the end paper extension strips. Just bring a pressing board over to rest the book on, because I don't like the joint to get squashed. Now what I'm going to do is find a paper which will match as near as possible these original end papers. First of all, let's make sure we get the right end paper on the right side of the book. Yes, that's the front one, so we'll do the front first. Now what I tend to do is collect old end papers, and I put them into folders so that this one's the dark coloured ones, and I can go through these and find old bits of paper which will match up with the original. I've already done this and come up with one that is very, very close to the original. It's just a strip, and I can get 2 strips out of that, one for the front and one for the back. So I'll use that. But it is worth saving all bits of old paper, coloured paper, anything like that, for doing this type of work. Okay, I'm going to cut this strip of paper into 2 strips. I just think they're about 50 millimeters wide, 5 centimeters wide. One for the front, one for the back. And then I want to cut them down to length. These are a little bit longer than the book, so I'm going to take a little bit off each end, because each end of this piece is slightly damaged. And so that's going to fit in there nicely. And then what I do then is just to fold the edge over on the edge of the pressing board, roughly to the height of the shoulder. So just creasing that over on the edge. Like that. And that's going to fit in there like that, and then the original end paper go on top of it. So it actually extends the original end paper, which will then go underneath the lip in the board. So to attach that, I use reversible PVA. And a sort of flat brush, and just apply PVA in the joint. And then we place that in, slide it into position. And push it back into the shoulder like that. Try to use the length of the bone folder, not the point, because you might break the paper. And then just to check again, this is the front end. And just flatten that out. Make sure there's no bits of glue on there. And then apply PVA to this edge here. and then pitch that to the foredge, so it's absolutely square on the foredge and level at head and tail, and then just let it drop down into the shoulder and flip up all those little frayed bits onto that extension piece. Very little of this will actually be seen if we manage to get all the little bits back. Hardly see anything. So I repeat the process on the other side, but I can't bend this back inside yet because it's too wet. So if I just turn the book over like that and just support it on the pressing board, and then repeat the process on this side. There, now I've got both extension pieces in place. I'll turn it back to the first one, and then we can just roll this down and crease it level with the top of the shoulder, and again use the bone folder on its length like that. Turn it back to the second one and just carefully roll that down and crease it with the top of the shoulder. So it's actually just like a new end paper going in. Okay, now we've got to reline the spine. I'm going to use some fray knot and then put on a 1-on 2-off hollow on the spine. So I'll just get the finishing press back. Pieces of board just to protect the book while it's in the press. There. To line the spine, I'm using some fray knot. Originally it had mull on, but this is thinner than the actual mull and a lot stronger. And I've cut a piece to give me about 25mm going round onto the front and onto the back, and it just wants to be slightly shorter than the length of the book. So I'll just cut that to size. Use the reversible PVA for this and glue the spine. And then put the fray knot on and just draw it down tightly over the back. And a good rub down. To take it out of the press and just put the fray knot just inside underneath these boards, a bit down on the edge. I do that because I can see clearly where the edge of the shoulders are now, so that when I put the hollow on I can make it fit exactly. For the hollow, I'm using acid-free craft paper with the grain direction running lengthways, head to tail on the book. And when I make a hollow, I just pitch the craft paper down about 1 millimetre short of that edge there. Turn the press round and then crease this exactly flush with the opposite side. That should be the width of the book, and then we just crease that down there like that. And just check. Now this